China doing more than just buying agriculture, now saying they'll increase foreign access to their markets. This after reports the U.S. might block investment flows into China, which White House advisor Peter Navarro downplayed on Squawk Box this morning. Let's get more on this announcement from China and the significance of it with John Rutledge. He's Chief Investment Officer at Safanad and a CNBC contributor. James Lucier is Managing Director at Capital Alpha Partners. And welcome to you both right now. John, I'll just start with you. Increasing access, China increasing access to its markets. You think this is a real deal?
Well, absolutely. It's something that was actually on the table as early as last February. It's not against Chinese interest. In fact, when you see them do something like this, it's very likely because they're trying to counter capital outflows, which weaken the RMB. And so they're very afraid of those capital outflows. So allowing foreign assets in helps support the RMB, which is good for both sides of this trade dispute.
James, what's this going to look like in practice, and which U.S. companies and investors might benefit the most?
Well, I think it's helpful to see companies like PayPal, for instance, finally get into the Chinese payments market. But we've been waiting years and years and years for this development. So I agree with John, it's a good thing. I agree with John that it's in the Chinese interest. But the reality is the Chinese have waited far too long. And in the meantime, we give the Chinese access to our financial markets that is absolutely not reciprocated by them.
They don't even have to play by our rules, so to speak.
They can declare their financial statements are state secrets.
Right.
Come on, that's not sustainable. It's got to go away, and it will soon.
But to your point about how they've dragged their feet on opening up their markets for access, even with this announcement today, does that mean they flip the switch on tomorrow and companies should really start planning for this, James? Or are they going to find this continue to get dragged out?
It's a positive sign, but anyone who does trade policy for a living will tell you that the Chinese have bought the same Boeing airplanes 5 or 6 times. Trust but verify. I think there are a lot of other data that show that the Chinese do need to open up urgently for their own reasons, whether it's the structural slowing in the Chinese economy, whether it's their fear of excess reliance on credit and other forms of stimulus, whether it is just popular discontent, whether it is the need to get better relations with the U.S. going into their week-long celebration for the National Day.
And John, do you credit the U.S. sort of strategy and approach to dealing with China for getting this win finally on them opening up markets? Because I know you don't think that cutting off our investment flows to China is a good idea, but is that rhetoric working, even if the administration, if Navarro denies that they're necessarily looking into it?
Well, to some extent that might be true, but let's remember, Kelly, that they said open the market to foreign investment, not to American investment. China is in the middle of rebalancing its entire portfolio of business and investments away from the U.S. and toward other places. And so this opens the door for European investors and other Asian investors and otherwise also. But the talks this weekend about delisting companies and restricting capital flows are really dumb. They drive capital out, they lower the RMB, they raise U.S. prices in China, and they lower Chinese prices in the U.S. and make the trade deficit worse. So come on, guys, keep your mouth closed and get a trade deal done.
Right, but unless it's actually helping to lead to this deal. But I want to ask both of you before we go, James, real quickly to you. You mentioned popular discontent as also maybe being part of why China is making these moves. Here's a tweet from Hu Xijin, the Global Times editor, who...
My favorite.
Yeah, we all follow quite closely for news on what China's thinking here. He talks about, the Hong Kong protesters planning serious violence for October 1st, including killing police officers, recruiting suicide attackers. Does the West, he say, support such democratic protests? What is this signaling to you about what the Chinese plans might be as these protests continue?
Well, it's clearly signaling that they intend to crack down hard, but they're also worrying about these protesters. It also tells us that we are across the negotiating table from people that attack the United States with the same rhetoric that might be applied by Iran to us. I mean, this is an irrational statement. And it shows how important it is to normalize relations between the U.S. and China by having total transparency on both sides and not on one side only.
John, are you concerned about what might play out here tomorrow and in the days ahead in Hong Kong?
Oh, we, of course, have now supporters in Taiwan, which is another interest of China. It's important for us to realize that China has neocons, too, not just the U.S. China's neocons are called the Shanghai Gang. and they're really the hardliners in this story. It is not possible for the Chinese government to back down in Hong Kong, because it would open up all sorts of other troubles for them.
Yeah.
And so I think they're trying rhetoric as much as they can, but I don't see the kids backing down either. So
right.
I have been worried about this for a long time and still am.
Yeah, all right. We'll see if it comes to a head beyond what we've seen already. Gentlemen, really appreciate it again today. James Lucier and John Rutledge, thank you so much.